Hi everybody. Wow, I went from 5 to 2. That's fun. Hey, you guys doing out there? This is Solar Gray, the cinematic sorcerer, and I am jamming out a little bit. I kind of like this new theme music, and I'm also doing just a little bit, of a sound check and a light check. Sound and lights, trying to get all that stuff set and balanced and all that jazz. And welcome to How We Roll. Wow, we got one person watching. I think that might be me. Alright, that's cool. That's all cool. So what I'm gonna do is head back to the title sequence. Alright. Yeah, that's a lot better. What's going on, guys? What's going on? Yeah, I'm doing a little bit of a different camera setup today because I didn't like all the space I had up there. You know, been checking out a lot of my older videos and things like that, but that's okay. So we're here, we're back. Welcome to How We Roll. This is the show where I tell you why we roll and how we became one of those gamer type people and all that jazz. I am Solar Gray. No, I'm not Ben Wolf Silvers. Who is that? I don't know that. Yeah, no, that's one of our people out there. I am Solar Gray, the cinematic sorcerer, and I'm saying thank you guys for showing up. I know we got some other people that are going to be coming in today, and we're going to be talking about the chat and all that stuff. But we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. I want to seriously give a shout out and a thanks to a lot of the people that like the show. If you guys want to be part of the experience here, let me just, yeah, you guys want to be part of the experience, I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, again, welcome back to the show, and we are going to be, talking about quite a few things. However, I'm going to get this stuff out of the way. Wow, it's almost like I'm being played off. This is kind of awesome. So, if you guys want to join us and be part of our show, that's easy. Just send in an email to backinthedeck@gmail.com. That's backinthedeck@gmail.com. Thanks for, what can I say, rolling critical on that subscribe button. That's how you guys know that we're here and all that jazz. Join the Deckers on the Book on Facebook and all the other social media. You can find us at Back in the Deck. Now, if you guys are wondering, yeah, I'm trying to get all that stuff out of the way at the beginning of the show so that we have a little bit more time to talk to you guys. Now, if you guys really like what we're doing and you guys want to help support us in a more personal and direct way, cool. Just head on over to patreon.com/BID_P. That's BID_P. And become one of our patrons. And for as little as $1 a month, you can help me keep this internet bill paid, keep our equipment at least up to as top notch as we can get it. I'm still working on a lot of things to give our stuff that cinematic look. So, with that, I'm going to say, hey, thanks a lot for showing up. Now, last week, we talked about some serious stuff. We talked about how when I finally became part of a gaming group, I had a problem. Ooh, that's loud. I had a problem with being part of the group, primarily because they were 7-8 miles away, and that is a serious problem when you are in say, I don't know, the 8th grade. You can't drive, and being part of being part of a community that grew up in the inner city, this is a really big thing. A lot of people don't quite understand. Growing up in the inner city, chances are you come from a single parent household for many reasons. Sometimes it's jail, sometimes it's death, sometimes things just don't work out, and you end up only having one parent, let's say. And when you have one parent, that parent is taking on the job of just about single um, every single family member that would be an adult. They have to be mother, father, sometimes grandmother, sometimes a whole bunch of other positions and slews and all that jazz. So, how do you manage it? Well, I honestly don't know. I don't know. I think miracle is what comes to mind. So, when it came to getting rides places, that just wasn't going to happen. Especially now, I have a very, like, what's the term? I'm really conflicted. Like, I think I'm very fortunate about the upbringing that I had because my mom um, really cared about us not turning out to be gangsters. That was a big thing. But the downside was that she worked graveyard shift. Now, what does this mean? This means um, when, well, in a nutshell, when I was growing up, my mom wanted to be there, but she wasn't in a position to be there, primarily because um, if she wanted to be part of our lives growing up, she had to be awake for it. But she worked in the middle of the night, essentially from 11:30 p.m. until about 8 or 9 in the morning. It varied because she kept working during the times where um, essentially you had the 1 hour lunch, but then before the 1 hour lunch was cycled out, they stopped paying for the 1 hour lunch, but they still let you have an hour, but your workday turned from 8 hours to 9 hours because of that 1 hour lunch until eventually they turned that 1 hour into a half hour. But it's weird kind of watching the decline. Either way, what this came down to was that by 11:30 at night, or by say 9:30 p.m. was when she was waking up. It's like her 9:30 a.m. was like everybody else's 7, or her 9:30 p.m. was like everyone else's 7 o'clock a.m. Okay, so she would be getting up for work in the middle of the day, and her nights off were Friday night and Saturday night, and back to work on Sunday night. Now, this is important because it really shows the limitations that she had, because her 8 hours of sleep came in the late afternoon to the night. So by the time I got home from school, she was asleep, um, or getting ready for bed. So that meant, in a nutshell, that she couldn't give us rides places. That just wasn't an option. When Now, this is all important because last time we talked, I talked about the gaming group I had in my junior high school. Now we're going to talk about the summer. Okay. Now, this was great. Okay. This was great as a kid because it gave us something that not a lot of other kids did, which was a lot of time with very little supervision. Okay. Now, using that supervision, I ended up doing a lot of different things. I learned to breathe fire. I learned to juggle knives. I learned to walk on broken glass. I learned stunt stuff by jumping in front of moving cars. I wasn't exactly a normal kid. And I really kicked my occult studies into overdrive, especially during the summer because I was up all day. I was up. Yay, I was up. And unfortunately, my mom did have this wacky, wacky habit of getting her 8 hours of sleep on the sofa in the living room. Primarily because the grandparents that were all there, they tended to use the bedrooms, and she was cool enough to let my brothers and I split the rooms, between us. But this kind of meant she didn't have she didn't have her own room. So she slept in the living room. Now, the downside to this, as a kid on summer vacation, was if you wake up mom, you gonna get beat. That's just what's gonna happen, you know. Um, by the way, welcome everybody who's watching. Thank you guys for tuning in. I've been putting up more notices and stuff like that, trying to get the media presence happening. And yeah, so mom's asleep. in the middle of the living room, which meant we had to go to that one place where parents today don't want their kids going. Boom, 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 boom. Outside. Oh no, we had to go outside. And outside, well, yeah, that's where melanoma lived. That's where the gangsters were. That's where the cars that we could get hit by happened. That's where the gangsters were. But it was either go outside and be a kid or stay inside and be quiet. And I'm talking like Arya Stark, like Shinobi, kind of, quick as a snake, quiet as a shadow. We couldn't make any noise because if and you parents out there, you guys can vouch for me on this. The moment you have kids, your hearing gets kicked up to like 13. So you hear a noise, you wake up because the kid either might be hurting themselves or hurting the house. And let's face it, the kids heal. So when the kids broke something in the house, you're gonna have to pay for that. And so that became a serious thing. So we spent a lot of time outside. And I was the kid on the block that, yes, mom owned the house, but that meant there wasn't much money for anything else. So when she gave me the $15 over the course of like a month to go get the D&D book, this was big. This was really big. This was, not, when I was growing up, we didn't have lunch money. We didn't come from an area that was well endowed enough with financial security to have yeah, we didn't have the financial security to actually pay for your lunch. What we got were meal tickets. Okay. We were given meal tickets, like it was a booklet of meal tickets, and you give in your meal, your ticket, you stood in line, you gave them your ticket, and you got your cafeteria meal, and there were no variations. Today we're having pizza, you getting pizza, and you getting the corn, and you're getting that 8 ounces of low-fat milk. But since this isn't communist, um, yeah, since this was not communist Russia, you could choose between regular milk or chocolate milk because you did have choice and variation. You got to choose your milk. So getting lunch money was not something that we got used to. And as far as an allowance was, well, she allowed us to go outside. you know. So getting money was a serious thing. And as kids, we would do what kids in urban areas did. Like, talk about environmentally conscious. We were digging through garbage for cans and recyclables to get the money that you got for recycling stuff. So I got like $7 or $8 from recycling over the course of a few weeks that I managed to hold on to because I didn't get beat up and it didn't get taken by gangsters and bullies and stuff like that. So, she kicked down $10 for me to catch the bus down to USC and spend half of my own money on this D&D book. And so this was a big deal. So summer vacation happened and it was like, yeah, we don't got to go to school. This is awesome. And I had an interesting pre-adolescenthood because I was the kid that kept leaving the neighborhood. I had to leave the neighborhood for school. And though it wasn't far, it was only maybe 6 or 7 miles away from home. It was a different planet. Okay. There's a big difference between 90th Street and 30th Street. And anybody that grew up in a big city, y'all can back me on this. 60 blocks is huge. That's huge. That's like a planet, There are some cities out here that aren't 60 blocks long. The current city I live in is only 70. It's 70 blocks from north to south, and then you're in an entirely different city. So I'm going that long to try and keep up with my friends doing the game stuff. And that was when I hit the first major paywall I ever hit in gaming, which was if there was another book that someone's playing from, that's cool. They got abilities I didn't know about, or, they were running a campaign that they didn't have to write. And I'm going, what? You can do that? That's a thing? And it's like, of course it's a thing. It's $10 for this adventure, and there we go. Yeah, done. Actually, it was more like $4, but you guys get the point. Thing was, $4, $10, $30, $80 may as well be $1 million to a kid from my neck of the woods. Hang on, I'm pulling up my notes here. Yeah, because back then it was big. So over the course of that summer, I could not keep up with the other members of my gaming group. Now, if you guys have been watching, and I'm looking at you, Ganja, yeah, I'm looking at, yeah, stop making that face. Anyway, um, you guys might know how far I had to go to get books and the difficulty I had building a gaming community on my block, okay? Because, we had that whole church thing going, that whole church thing that was happening with the preachers and all that jazz, but yeah, I mean, I would try and say, all right, well, hey, let's try and play this Dungeons and Dragons thing, and I got no, that's the work of the devil. Oh no, hit all that stuff. You got all them dice. Them degenerates down on the corner playing dice. You can't play dice, and so that was a little bit of a complication. And then a miraculous thing happened over the course of that summer, which was the building of the Rapid Transit District's Blue Line train. Okay, it's now known as the MTA, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, but back then it was the rough, tough, and dirty. And this was a train that went from Los Angeles to the city of Long Beach. Now, this is huge, okay? This was seriously huge at the time because I had to go north over to USC to do all that other stuff. But this train opened up the South. This train opened up what was beyond the Hawthorne Mall. I just had to go through Compton and Watts and all the terrible places that was worse than the places that I grew up in. But but it took me out to where the white people lived and it dropped me off in a downtown area. So over the course of that summer, instead of spending all of that money that I got from recycling cans and bottles, and I would say some of the wacky antics that we did to make them worth more, but this is YouTube, and I ain't giving nobody any ideas. Go figure it out for yourself. Um, I got my very first bus pass. Okay, my very first bus pass, and this was golden. Okay, this allowed me to hop on any public transportation that had the paint job of the stuff by my house, and I could go anywhere for free for an entire month. Okay, this was $4 a month to go all over the greater Los Angeles area. And Google it. We're like 70 miles wide. Okay, so this was big. So I could make that, 5-hour 4 bus trip to the Last Grenadier, or I could take a 1 hour bus ride east and then a 1 hour train ride south and go to a city that seemed a lot friendlier than um, than Burbank. The problem is that as you go further south, different municipal bus lines happened. Okay. And that meant I could go as far as the RTD went south, but then I would have to hop off to like Gardena Transit or Long Beach Transit or Torrance Transit. And so that's a brand new set of bus fares. So to go south, well, to go all the way to Burbank and back costed about $2.70. But to go to say Long Beach or Torrance and back costed about $8 because I had to hop on so many different train stuff or so many different municipal lines, and the transfers only worked for 2 hours. So I would be paying fresh fares. But with this train got me all the way to Long Beach for free. And then I could hop the municipal lines from Long Beach for like 25 cents. So it made it more affordable. This was like, you know, being the kid from the poor area, being able to go to where the richer people lived was like, yes, I finally have my way in. I can leave this hellhole. And so I looked up the phone book. I tried to find gaming stores, yada yada yada, and I found this place called the War House. Um, and I can say that by name, one because they're not terrible, but they're still there. Okay, this is rare in brick and mortar gaming stores, but I could go to the War House, and hopefully I wouldn't have the same experience as the Last Grenadier. and the warehouse was maybe a 5 block walk from the train station. So all I had to do was hop on the train, get off the train, walk like maybe a mile, and I'd be at the store, and it would take a lot less time. So I did that. I did that. And funny thing, there's a reputation that gamers are fat, sweaty, and they smell bad. Now, back in the summer, I recently like changed my lifestyle around, and I started eating healthier, and like I had nothing to do in the middle of the night when I had insomnia. My mom was at work, so I started exercising, and I was in the process of losing weight and going through a growth spurt. But we're talking Southern California, and the city is called Long Beach. Okay, and make no mistake. Okay, there is a very long beach here, but essentially the store that I went to was 33 residential blocks away from the beach, so it may as well not have been there. So I get on this train, I get off, I walk, but I walk this mile in the summer in Southern California. Are you seeing where I'm going with that? So I arrived to the store fat, smelly, and fat, stinky, and sweaty. Okay, and they start to act the same way that the people at the last grenadier or the final rifleman. Um, yeah, I'm gonna fix that in editing. They acted exactly the same way that the Storm Burbank did for about 5 minutes, and then the guy that worked at the store asked me where I was from, and I told him I cross streets, and he was like, "Why are you all the way out here?" And it was very much like a picturesque moment from a movie, because it was very much the you came a long way to do this thing. You must be real dedicated. At least that's how it was in my mind. Um, and I told them I wanted to learn how to play. I had the book, um, but what I didn't have was an understanding. Um, I didn't have an understanding of what it was on what it was to play, what it meant. And I showed them my character, and they said, "Okay, I can see that somebody helped you with this character." And so um, they gave me a walkthrough on, um, they gave me a walkthrough on the world of Kryn. This was Dragonlance, okay? Because that was kind of hot at the time because of the novels from Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss. The dragons of season or the dragons of year's time of day. That's what I call it now. I actually it's actually closer to, let's see, dragons of winter twilight, dragons of summer's dawn. But each one of the novels had a title like that, so it really was dragons of season's time of day. Um, and this was cool. They even recommended the book. And I'm just like, dude, this is awesome. So I read the book. I got a better sense of the world, and they were talking about dragons. And for a kid who, the closest thing to reading fantasy novels that I had done at the time was essentially the old classics like Beowulf. Read The Hobbit, that had a dragon. But then I read Lord of the Rings, that didn't have a dragon. And Beowulf kind of had a dragon at the end, but this was like Kryn, where there were dragons all over the place, and it was cool. And I never thought about crossbreeding between the species, so this was my introduction to the half elf, and I'm like, dude, well, that okay. So yeah, that was a thing. And all in all, it was a good trip. But what it didn't give me was a gaming group, but it gave me a little more insight. So when I got home from a couple of summer days of doing this, I tried talking to my friends again, and I'm really trying to sell them on the D&D things. And I had a friend named David. David was honestly, I think, one of the most influential friends that I've ever had. Okay, he was in a wheelchair, but he did Filipino stick fighting. He could type 90 words a minute with one hand. He was really into computer programming, and he used his disability checks to buy things like computers and video game stuff. So we would go to his house and we would play games on his Sega Genesis. Now I know in the Instagram that I sent out for this one, I said we'd be talking about the NES, but it all kind of runs together because this was the same house for the longest time. And when the home video game market hit, there was a lot, like there was a steady decline in RPG games, okay? Because you could either get together with your friends, do all this reading, all this writing, all this math, or you could get together with your friends, play with these TV images that you could manipulate, and then argue with them in exactly the same way. So six on one hand, half a dozen on the other. Um, and David had a Sega Genesis. So it would be David, his brother Sean, and my two friends on the block. Now, I'm thinking this would be a perfect gaming group, but at the same time, I'm also thinking I could play with his Sega Genesis because my mom won't buy me one. So this is where tabletop gaming kind of took a backseat in behavior, and I stopped trying to reach out to the people in my neighborhood to play these role-playing games with me, specifically Dungeons and Dragons, because at the time I didn't know any other games. And then, due to some of the youth groups I was in outside of the church, I started going to summer camp. Um, one These were like super super cheap summer camps. If you had the gear, you could just go, but none of it really left Los Angeles or Orange County, which meant the nights were hot. So did I need a tent? Not really. I could just sleep on the ground. God knows I could do it. And if I needed a tent, I knew how to sew. I had bed sheets. I could make my own. Thank you. Um, and I would be going to camp. But what this gave me was access to a lot of these kids that lived in all these areas I'd be catching the train and the bus to, be it the San Fernando Valley, be it Burbank, be it the San Gabriel Valley, be it Long Beach, or even Orange County. Um, and a couple of them played Dungeons and Dragons, and they were shocked. Now, this was my first real experience at tokenism, okay? Because these are kids that had never actually seen like more than one or two black people. And then here I was, I had long dreadlocks, I had kind of a mohawk, I listened to heavy metal, and I talked about wanting to play Dungeons and Dragons. And they're like, but you're supposed to like the rap music and the gangsters and the braps, but why are you talking to me about the Metallica? And in the same way that, the heads of young boys blow up when they find out that girls get sexually frustrated, they looked at me saying, well, you can't be black. You're in the heavy metal and Dungeons and Dragons. Like that, huh? So I ended up making some friends with the heavy, with the heavy metal crew of them, and they played Dungeons and Dragons. And I had a friend named Chris. He and I were peas and carrots for like 11 years because he was the white kid that was into rap music, and I was the black kid that was into metal. But we can meet in the middle because we knew each other's stuff and liked each other's stuff to a certain degree. Like I was not as in to Dr. Dre as he was, but he was not into Slayer and Metallica and Kiss as much as I was. So we kind of met up in the middle there. And so sure enough, I ended up hanging out with these guys, and we started playing D&D. And our games were essentially the most basic games. Now I look back, and again, this was almost 30 years ago, guys. We're talking 1990. So I'm looking back 30 years ago and looking at the way that I write now versus the way that I was writing then, and I was playing games with them then. I that there was seriously there was no big deal. It really was There is no comparison. It's apples and oranges because I was a decent storyteller, a good writer for where I was. But where I was didn't have the same educational resources as where my friends were. I mean, these dudes were like in the valley, okay? The valley in the 80s, all right? So we're talking like Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Um, we love the Breakfast Club. And though Bender was fierce, you drop him and Lean on Me with Morgan Freeman, and he would get torn apart. And that's where I came from. Okay, it was normal for me to have to dodge gunfire. It was school shootings were normal for me, and so like their toughest dude. And again, I was not, you know, I wasn't a good fighter. I was all about peace. I was like, hey, let's talk this out. Is this what Martin Luther King would want? So in a nutshell, yeah, I took a lot of beatings. I took a lot of beatings, and I couldn't beat their toughest dude, but the five people under him couldn't touch me because, the five people under the toughest are like, well, you got to be afraid of me. And I'm like, dude, my best friend got shot yesterday. I really don't care what you have. Do you have a gun? Because my mom picks me up by the ankles and she beats me with sticks. I'm not scared of you. I'm sorry. I kind of find what you're saying cute because my brother busted me in the head with nunchucks 3 weeks ago. So that was where I was coming from. And the dichotomy of the two things literally made my nose bleed because I wanted to be where they were, but they wanted the trappings of where I was, and never the twain would meet. But as far as storytelling went, I had only read two of the Dragonlance novels, and I couldn't afford the Dragonlance settings. And though the Warhouse was cool, they weren't cool with a smelly fat kid sitting in the store reading all of their role playing books without buying anything. And I can't be mad at them for that. Okay, and why was I sweating? Again, it was a mile walk in the sun with no shade in the Southern California summer. So we're talking easily 85 degrees of beating sun as you're walking for a mile and a half. That ain't exactly easy. Um, but I had kind of found my tribe. Um, and when the guys came over, we didn't do a whole lot because they very rarely came over. I mean, if they had to stay on the bus for all that time, their parents were like, yeah, sure, I'll give you a ride. How far away does this kid live? Oh my God, he lives in this area. You're not going to be here after dark. Um, so, we would hang out. I would teach them a little sword fighting because that's what I thought I knew how to do as a kid. And, I'd be teaching them stuff about my spiritual upbringing outside of Christianity. And stuff was kind of cool. So, I mean, that summer was great, but it wasn't really based on role playing. Okay. But it did give me a good foundation. And, my white friends actually started getting along with my black friends when they came around. So that was cool. But as always, there were always parental issues. Now, Dave, I brought up Dave. He was what we called mulatto. Okay, I don't like that phrase because it means mule, but he is essentially half black, half white, and he had both of his parents. And this was an interesting thing because there was finally a white lady that lived on the block, and she was the manager of the Kmart down the street, and or at least the Kmart that was only a couple of miles away that we all had, the one that I talked about in the first episode when I went looking for Dungeons and Dragons. And so I didn't realize that I could have asked her to like order some books or anything like that, but you live, you learn, you buy diapers. And as we were talking about the video game craze, I was pretty much welcomed over there all the time to play video games and to hang out with my friend because his mom really noticed that I didn't look at him as my friend in a wheelchair. He was just my friend. And she came over to the house one day and she saw that I had a great grandmother and a great grandfather. So I grew up with people that weren't mobile. That was just normal. but because your body isn't working doesn't mean your mind isn't working. So I'd be talking to him about the game campaigns I would be planning while we're playing, we'd be playing Golden Axe or something. And, he didn't want to play, but he would tell me about story structure and stuff like that. And I'm talking about all this here because a lot of people don't quite understand how gaming itself is a vehicle to making friends that matter. Okay? I really hate how parents look at their kids and they say, "Oh, your friend Steve." And it's like, "That's not my friend Steve." "Well, isn't he in your homeroom?" "Yeah, I've got no say about that. We have to sit in the same classroom or we live on the same block. That don't mean that they're my friends." They are kids that live on the same block or kids that have the same classes as I do. That's like me calling all your coworkers your friends. And my mom was real clear about how she barely liked anybody she worked with. um, and I kind of felt the same. So when we went back to school in 90, in September, I had actual friends at school at this point. I dropped 60 pounds. I'd grown 6 inches. And I spent a lot of that summer in pain and walking, and hallucinating. And, I had a strange childhood. And more people at school were more open to me. But um, the main two friends that I had in school, and I don't mean the gaming kids, I mean the two girls that I hung out with. Y'all know who you are, but I'm not going to say your names. They were still there. They were still there, and they were talking to me like I was a human being. And we ended up getting a new popular kid. And not going to say his name because he's still out there, but he could dance, he was good looking, he was charismatic, and he rode my bus to school. And he and I became friends because he saw that I wasn't trying to be gangster. He was legitimately trying to be a rapper. He was writing all the time and going to the studio, this magical place called the studio, all the time. And he lived I would say a 25-minute skateboard ride from my house. And I'm like, cool. That meant 25 minutes on a skateboard. So that was about 10 minutes by bus, whenever the bus got there. So that was cool. And they became a little more open to the idea because of the science teacher that I had, who's out there. I should really look him up because this dude was the reason that I was able to let my geek flag fly. Okay, this guy, best teacher I've ever had because he was about practically applying science to everything. I mean, I would not have majored in physics in college if not for this guy. I wouldn't have the teaching style I have if not for this guy. He brought comic books to class and said that we could read them if we could point out the scientific principles that they exemplified. And then when we were in the ninth grade, we could only read them if we could find one or two scientific principles that the books got wrong. You see where we're going with this? I talk about him all the time. He pulled out an NES during one of the state mandated tests that took 4 or 5 hours and just started playing because he didn't have to take the test and he had all of his work done. And he would let us play with these slot cars and comic books and video game systems if we could tell him that we understood how they worked scientifically and we could prove that we had at least a rudimentary understanding of electronics or magnetic induction or scientific principles that are used in comic books, like how are they applying super speed or super strength, like why when Superman grabs a plane doesn't it just break, like what does he have to do to make it not break. These are the things that he put us through. And he brought Dungeons and Dragons books. you know so you see where this is going. He didn't let me have them but he allowed me to copy them. Okay, and I don't mean with a machine. I literally had to write out all the books. And this was a blessing and a curse because when I started screwing up in his class, he's like, I know how much work you put into your gaming and your comics, so why aren't you doing this in my class or your English class or your math class, or your Japanese or your German or your Latin, I mean, it was one of those things. And yeah, it was that kind of school. Um, but he really got me into it and showed me the statistical analysis. And I'm like, how can you make a character that is withstanding everything I'm throwing at him? And he really was the one who taught me how to be a better GM by thinking about all of these factors. And I was hooked. I was hooked. So when on the 3-day weekends and stuff that I could go see my friends from the youth groups, I started applying what he taught me, and our games became a lot better. So yeah, there were the paywalls of the books that I couldn't afford, and I had to work a lot harder to get at it. And honestly, you know, um, you know who you are if you're watching this. You're probably not, but in case you are, seriously, like I wouldn't be the man I am today without the foundation that he and my math teacher had actually planted during that time. Um, so yeah, these were those things. Now, during this time, of course, I was going through problems. I had massive compounds of complex post traumatic stress disorder from the school shootings, from the drive-bys, from, having taken a bullet myself, having to deal with regular school bullies on one hand, and then gangsters with submachine guns on another hand, and the anxiety of going to places that don't welcome black kids, and compounded with the anxiety of getting home to where these gangsters were after dark, you know, and taking it upon myself to try and make some of my own money. So I started juggling at Venice Beach for, I think y'all call it busking now. Yeah, I was a street performer at Venice Beach, to try and make money to, support these hobbies that I was trying. And there was the risk of coming home with all of these butcher knives, So I'm armed and carrying concealed weapons. So I was afraid of the police. I was afraid of bullies. I was afraid of gangsters. Um, and I still had to go to these places that didn't have a whole lot of open arms for black kids, you know? And so it became difficult. But I've been talking for about 45 minutes. So next week, join us because we're just going to skip a year because there was that, let's say, a gap year in my gaming education. But we're going to talk about high school. We're going to talk about high school and the people that I met there. So we're going to skip 91. But yeah, 92, that was when the stuff started opening up. And there was a change. There was a change to the gaming community. So with that, I want to thank you guys for coming down and showing up to this particular episode of How We Roll. I also have to wrap it up because today is the day that I go to the community center over at Magic City Comics and Games in Paramount, and I teach my classes on D&D to junior high school, and college kids who come in. This is the volunteer work, and we're building a community there. And these kids are great and fun, and I like them a lot and all that jazz. So I've got to get those lesson plans up and going. But I'm still talking, yet I'm not being played off. Oh, what's this? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, look at that. I'm being played out, aren't I? Yes, you are being played out. That is fun and all that jazz. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Just trying to make sure that everything I'm talking about is not being overshadowed by the music. But thank you guys for showing up. I want to give a great big thank you and all that jazz over to our friends over in NP City. Don't think just because I didn't mention you guys, I didn't know about you. Okay, yeah, you guys have been going really, really good for us today. And for those of you guys just getting here, I appreciate your guys' presence, but unfortunately, we gotta go. We gotta go. I gotta get over and start teaching these kids and doing the lectures. Now, soon I'm gonna be posting at least the audio from my lectures because there are some elementary school kids there, and their parents don't want their faces on the internet because, the web is dark and full of perverts. So, with that, I'm going to say thank you guys for showing up. And if you guys got any questions or comments or other stuff that says, hey, I totally get where you're coming from, I'm cool with that. Just send a message over to backinthedeck@gmail.com. That's BACKINTHEDECK@gmail.com. Hit a critical hit on that subscribe button and back that critical hit up with another successful hit on the notification button. Share these videos. If you want to help me make this community bigger, then yeah, do all of that. That's right. I'm trying to kick the truth to the youth. That is what we're doing. Now, if you guys want to help us out in a more direct and personal manner, I appreciate that a lot. So, head on over to our Patreon at Back on the Deck at patreon.com/BID_P. And just for as little as $1 a month, you guys can be one of the deckers that help keep the lights on and all that stuff. And that comes with terrain that I send to you guys. And, our tiers are awesome. They go from $1 all the way to $100. And but just for $1, you can really help us keep the lights on and help us upgrade our computers and go around the country doing the stuff that we do and all that stuff. So with that, though, I'm going to say, if anybody tells you that you can't like what you like or have the hobbies you like because of the circumstances of your birth, be it race, religion, creed, gender identity, sexual orientation, your disability, or your budget, you just tell them that we said to take those cards and put them back in the deck. This is Solar Gray, the Cinematic Sorceress, and thank you guys for finding out how we roll, and we will see you guys over at our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/BID_P, and we will see the rest of you guys here next week for another episode of How We Roll.